So the other piece of this puzzle is the business itself. So we've talked about the individual person and what they have to do better to be able to get funding, correct? A lot of people want to rely on the business itself to be able to get funding. And usually that requires some maturity in the business, for one. But it also requires that some red flags are not there with the business. And so let's talk about some of those red flags that we see with the business.
You know something? I'm just going to go ahead and put it right out there. You know, there are scams all over the internet.
Yeah.
There'll be people that'll come up and tell you that you can get 100, 200,000 without having a person as a personal guarantee.
Right.
Let me start first. I'm not going to say that's not possible, but first there's requirements to get there.
Right.
So if you were to look at the Small Business Administration's minimum guidelines for small businesses and their lending requirements, the government classifies a small business as a business that has $5 million in gross sales within a year. $5 million is considered a small business.
Right.
So if your gross sales...
Oh, we're super small. Most people are super small.
Yes, however way you want to put it. But if you're doing $5 million in gross sales in 1 year, you're classified as a small business in government standards.
Right.
Now you possibly can get loans and funding without a personal guarantee.
I'm so glad.
So let's start there.
I'm so glad that you helped to numerize that, because it's a lot of people don't understand. They think that I'm a small business.
Yes.
But even in the pandemic, we saw that these businesses that we would think of as big businesses were still jumping in, getting the small business money, because they're still categorized as small businesses. But they're in a whole different league than your average mom and pop or other person that you know that owns a small business. Two totally different things.
Yeah, just since you just mentioned that, what the big businesses did was each location, say a chain of Kentucky Fried Chickens, right? Each location may only have, they said the loan was applicable for businesses that have 500 employees and below.
Right.
Right, and so if you look at one Kentucky Fried Chicken location,
just one location,
right, they may only have 10 employees or 12 employees
at that location.
Yes, and so they looked at that as they can qualify under a small business scenario, but they didn't take into account there are 300 locations,
right,
which is 3,000 people. So they kind of snuck in.
There you go. Somebody
take advantage of the program.
Knew what they were doing when they got snuck in, but we won't talk about that.
Right.
So the criteria is different, clearly.
Yes.
But the bottom line is we're small businesses.
Small business.
So what can we do better? We're not going to be able to compete with those guys, right?
Right.
And that's in that same category. But what can we do better to make sure that we as small businesses, the business itself, can qualify for funding?
Well, one thing I can tell you to be smart about it is to have the right expectations. So don't think that you're going to go into the bank and get a loan, $200,000 or $300,000. Matter of fact, $50,000.
Right.
If your sales are under $5 million and don't have a personal guarantee, meaning you're going to have someone behind them, preferably a 720 credit score for business credit.
Right. And obviously, they're supposedly making some exceptions in some scenarios, because they're trying to do better at getting funding to people. But in general, we're still seeing that a lot of the basic criteria that's needed still is not met for the business. So, for instance, let's say the business lacks documentation. They wanted tax returns. Have you done tax returns for the business? It sounds simple, but a lot of people delay in doing that because, one, they don't want to pay Uncle Sam or don't want to have to pay Uncle Sam right now, but also they just haven't gotten around to doing all of those pieces. And that is the typical challenge of a small business owner, is that they may not be doing the bookkeeping on a regular basis. to be able to, that's what I see. Bookkeeping is a big one, whether it's QuickBooks or whatever it is.
Right.
Then proper payroll and tax reporting, because if you use a payroll company, they're reporting those things already for you. And so that track record is very easy to get to. Your accountant can get to it easier when you're doing it through a service. But if you're not, now you're scrambling to try to put paperwork and documentation together. So I've definitely been noticing that that's a big barrier right now for the businesses, that these small businesses don't have that paperwork together.
Well, in hindsight, to not just the paperwork, of course, when you speak of the paperwork, just so I can be specific to everyone that's here listening
Sure.
to this, is that, for one, you have articles of incorporation.
Oh, yeah.
And
Right.
that's what...
Well, I forgot about that paperwork.
Now, you can either be a sole proprietorship,
Right.
where you can just use your social as your business entity. You could be an S Corp, C Corp, or LLC.
Right.
Now you go incorporate all those things at your state level, at the state institution.
Right.
And then additionally to that, most states have the ability where you can go online and see your corporation in good standings.
Absolutely.
And who are the principals of that corporation.
Right. And tell them, Vince, if they're not listed, or other people that may, for instance, have the great credit scores that they want to use to help get funding,
Okay.
if they're not listed on the business, will funding work for them?
Well, that's going to be a lot more difficult, if you don't have the guarantor to support, the business model. Now,
and they're not listed on the business.
Not listed on
Right.
the state's business website.
Right.
Now, other ways that you can add people on there for S and C corporations, you can do it through bylaws.
Okay.
It's say in the corporation bylaws, Lisa Gavin is the owner.
Okay.
Or through an LLC, you can do it through an operating agreement.
That's more documentation. So now we have to have bylaws ready. We
Yeah.
gotta have potentially operating agreements ready.
Yes.
Sometimes minutes from a
Minutes
board
of-
meeting
yeah.
to determine that you've added people on.
Yes.
Again, documentation. And if that documentation is not present for the business, you might have struggles getting funding.
Right, and then from there, we're looking at business bank accounts to support what you've done with the state and the proper name of the corporation. And so from there, that paper trail starts for success. You're actually represented as a business.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else that you can think of for the business that may be barriers for it to get funding?
Well, one thing that I do see that people seem to underestimate it, in a business, you would expect it to have a phone number.
A listed phone number.
Just that simple.
Yeah.
And an email address.
That's true.
Businesses in today's world do a lot of their correspondence via email, under times such as today. And one thing that I do want to highlight again, is that the Small Business Administration threshold is $5 million. So do not have any kind of expectation that you can get a loan or get a vehicle on the business without guaranteeing it.
Yeah. I know that there is a point that people can grow to, that the business has been established long enough and it has enough of a track record, and the business has its own established credit report that details that the business has paid its obligations on time over many different obligations and over a period of time. And so we're not saying that you can't grow to the point that the business can do that stuff on its own, but don't just walk in with those expectations until that has been built and developed. And until then, you better make sure as an individual, you're ready.
Well, again, just in conjunction of what you're saying, to be very specific, at least me, through our experience, and what we're talking about here is through statistical information.
Right.
So we're not just saying that we hypothesize about these things going on.
We've helped about 17,000 people, so I think our numbers are pretty high in terms of experience. So.
Exactly. So we actually keep statistics on these types of things to be very accurate, in the way we represent our communication. Now, again, if you have a company that's doing over $5 million a year, yes, you may have that possibility where you can get loans without the personal guarantor.
Right.
You can get cars without the personal guarantor. But then once you're over $5 million, it kicks in other things that are more applicable, like audited taxes and all these other things.
Good point. Way better documentation.
Right. Just to be specific, can you tell them what audited taxes mean?
Well, I'll just say this. How about an accounting department?
Yeah.
How about a legal department?
Right.
For those institutions, they're going to have the track record because they have the resources to have all of those things be structured. And the small business, the real small business people don't.